Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tate for a very special spoiler discussion. And today we are going to be talking everything The Rings of Power Season 2, which is now finished streaming on Prime Video for this year. We are at the dawn of a Season 3 announcement, according to industry reports. We'll talk about that maybe at the end. And we're going to be giving our thoughts on the season as a whole. We'll be talking about a couple of the storylines, giving our thoughts and everything in between. But before we start talking any of that, Tate, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing good. This season crept up on us, right? Like, I know that we've had a lot of TV this year and there's been a lot of things, but I can't remember what it was, but it was suddenly like, oh, Rings of Power is out. Oh, like Rings of Power is ending. And they was just kind of trying to watch as many episodes as possible to get it watched for review. So yeah, this one kind of sprung itself on me a bit, but I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of jumping in with that, we do want to jump to everybody watching at home. So please do comment with your thoughts on The Rings of Power Season 2. This is a spoiler discussion, so you are more than welcome to talk about spoilers from Season 1 to Season 2. If you've read The Silmarillion, Lord of the Rings, etc., 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 I would say comment at your own peril. They've been around for decades, so there are spoilers gloating. The series is, of course, adapting some of it, not all of it. So book readers, you are more than welcome to put those as well. Obviously, we all know what ends up happening. It's a prequel to Lord of the Rings. There's going to be many rings being made in the One Ring at the end of it all. Probably Season 4. We'll also get to that. But yes, you do get involved. Comment your thoughts. And if you want to find out about other videos as well, so we're working on, it's been quite busy this week. We've got a few more videos going up. You can get us on linktree.com/cinemasavvy. That'll take you through to our Redbubble page as well. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, you name it, it's there. And that rounds out doing the intro. I wish I could do an intro as majestical as the weird opening credits they still have, where it looked like, is it like it's almost like they've got sand on an instrument,
but
and just
more like gold dust kind of on an instrument, and it kind of changes with the music and everything like that. I found myself liking it throughout this series.
I like it. It's not pretending to be Lord of the Rings. And Ben McCrary, actually, I know we'll talk other stuff, but as far as a composer goes, he's actually been really good on these first two seasons, and I hope he sticks with all five. I have very much an attachment to composers getting to compose the entirety of TV shows they work on. I think some of the best ones have that. There's nothing wrong with composers switching sometimes, but I do feel they've made an absolute banging choice with him as the composer. Didn't really think I'd be talking about the composer 3 minutes in, but here we are. But going back to the plan as such, Tate, Season 1, 2 years ago.
Yes.
What a time. I had a fucking dreadful mustache for a few weeks, which is on the... it looks like, and I'll say this, if anyone's curious, go back to the spoiler-free review. I look like an obese Mario at that point in time. But the spoiler discussion happened. I enjoyed Season 1. I don't think it blew me away like some other shows, but I know this is a 5-season series. It's literally, you think of the 5-part film structure. We've had the opening act. That was Season 1. I loved the ending, the Mordor stuff, and I was invested, ready for Season 2. However, I did not care for the weekly watching, and I instead, for this series, have waited till, I think I started on Wednesday. I did it all late in the space of 2 days. And I think I enjoyed it a lot more binging this, but I'm curious on your thoughts really quickly on Season 1.
Season 1 was okay. And I think it's fine to say it was okay. It got a lot of hate. It's still getting hate now, which is completely unwarranted. And, we've dealt with that on this channel before. So that's absolutely fine that people can give hate to a show, but not in the ways that it was given hate, just completely unwarranted and completely unnecessary. It was fine. It had beautiful visuals. It had decent acting. It had a story that you could follow. For a person who, like myself, hasn't read the Silmarillion, I haven't really. I've had the Lord of the Rings books read to me when I was younger. I've read The Hobbit, if that helps. But I like the films, if that counts for anything. But I kind of wanted to explore more into the world of the Lord of the Rings because I know it's such a dense universe and such a dense thing to carry through, which is why they've gone and given this 5 series. And knowing that series 1 was just kind of a setup kind of series, we need to introduce all the characters that are going to be really relevant to the show. We need to introduce, all the different settings and where everything was before shit hit the fan. And season 1, end of season 1 is exactly when that takes place. So, you have Mordor creation, and you have like Sauron kind of coming out of the shadows and all of that. And we're kind of left going into season 2 with kind of the balance of power starting to tip, and different characters being placed into different situations, some better than others, and people trying to find their footing in this new world that's just kind of starting to collapse in on itself. And I enjoy the fact that that was the setup. But like I said, it was okay. It wasn't anything mind-blowing. There was maybe 1 or 2 moments which made me go, wow, this is good television. This is a good thing to watch. But I completely agree with you. This is the kind of show which I didn't really care for watching on a weekly basis, and cared for a lot more watching season 2 in big chunks, watching 2 or 3 episodes at a time, and really going into it and getting involved into the universe. Because these episodes flow quite nicely, it's not like a weekly TV show where you have a week, you have a break, like you need a week to digest it, and then you go on to the next episode. These are episodes which really, the information flows from one episode to the other, and it's better to watch as a binging format. So, I mean, my initial thoughts on Series 2, I really liked Series 2. It's a massive improvement on Series 1 in every way, shape, or form. And as we go through all of the different, storylines that is in this series, I'll kind of talk about and gush over how actually I had an amazing time with this show.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And even talking some behind the scenes on season 2, I want to talk about one of the most incredible ones, which is this becomes the first live action Middle Earth series / film, whatever, live action production to not shoot in New Zealand. And when this announcement happened, some people were more angry than they already were 2 years ago. And I just sat there thinking, wow, the first season's had an incredibly rough production due to COVID, like many shows. However, New Zealand has far stricter laws. There were articles like Jeff Bezos wanted to fly into the country to visit the set, and they were like, no, go away. And I actually agree with New Zealand on that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, pulling the production to the UK, we've got the best production crews in the entire world. Everyone is shooting here now. And for those Tolkien experts who love to talk about how Tolkien is Tolkien that, so much of it is, I mean, even like the Midlands, Oxfordshire, it's a historical age of England within history.
I wonder if the Shire is based off one of the many shires we have in England.
And I'm pretty sure the Shire's, what we were told, the Shire's location on the map of Middle Earth is literally maybe Oxfordshire on the map of Europe or something, like the precision that Tolkien had of that. So it coming to the UK to shoot here, it was something I did think, is it going to look like England in the same way we look at Lord of the Rings, think, is that New Zealand? But it looked like Middle Earth. It had what you needed. It was shot on location. It wasn't just chucked in a studio. It wasn't things like the volume. This is the most expensive show ever made. I don't know if the budget includes the buying of the rights, which was $4 billion. I think it's 800 million per season, 5 years locked in with Amazon. And on top of that money that went to the Tolkien estate, then there's, of course, a shooting budget. So I think I read a report, it's 700 million budget for season 2, which includes that right sort of stuff. And I'd imagine if or when season 3 is getting put into production, that is also going to have a whopping budget like that. And I will add to this, you can see the budget on the screen. We've spoke a lot recently with TV shows. I don't want to pick on the Acolyte, but it's a recent one where that budget's 230 mil for 8 episodes, all of which like 30 minutes. That's kind of insane. I like that show. I think the budgeting's all wrong. It doesn't look cheap, but it doesn't look like 250 million, and it certainly didn't warrant 30-minute episode runtimes. Whereas this is an hour each episode. And I kind of miss that TV can do this, where so many series, so many shows are going to this weird new format of we'll do it 30 minutes one week, 40 the next, then back to 25, because it's as long as we need it to be. But actually, giving yourself an hour per episode, and certainly in this series' case, when you're juggling several storylines at once, the 1 hour really does help. And what this series did a lot better than season 1 is it had certain episodes dedicated to those storylines more than others, that you'd get maybe a little bit more time with Numenor 1 week than you would with the dwarves, but then the next 2 episodes you'll get more time with the dwarves, and it really worked for the structure of the season. I think that was a massive improvement on season 1. But kind of talking about some of them storylines if we want to go into, because it is a spoiler discussion, as we said it would be. We've picked an order. It it might be deemed order of from least enjoyed to most enjoyed, but either way, it's like what we used to Game of Thrones, right? We'd pick an area, we'd lock in on, we'd hone on that. We are saving the two goats of the series for the end, but we'll start with the Strangers storyline. Daniel Wayman returns, playing a wizard. Could you have ever guessed it'd be Gandalf? Listen, I'm not gonna mock the Gandalf stuff. This isn't a storyline I particularly care for. I don't mind Gandalf, and again, like I've not read the Silmarillion, I've not read Lord of the Rings. I've read The Hobbit and I didn't like it. That's why I've never gone to read the others, and maybe I get shot for saying it on this stream. But I just didn't care for it. I've enjoyed other fantasy books more, other books more. It just wasn't my thing, so I was never going to read the Silmarillion. But I am aware that Gandalf came at a different point within the Third Age. And it is weird to have him in this show. But I really like Daniel Wayman's performance in this. I liked the concept of he's got to find the staff, and that's ultimately the test. Is he looking for power? Is he looking for friendship or doing the right thing? Tom Bombadil finally makes an appearance after many people make jokes that he wasn't in the Lord of the Rings films when it was one of the big things they cut. A mystical entity that's essentially been on Middle-earth for an eternity or something. So I've read. I just didn't particularly care for this, and it's really tricky. I'm not gonna harp on it. I just don't know, like, because he isn't there, and I'm not sticking to the books like canon this, canon that, because if I'm being really honest about the Silmarillion, I don't care what people say. It wasn't published by J.R.R. Tolkien. It was published by his son. Yes, he had the rights to publish it, and it was edited by another author. But fundamentally, of when people get batshit insanely riled up on that, that's something I'll always say is that it wasn't. I don't care what people say. It's edited. It's his passages. It's his scripts. It's his words. It's his notes. It was not published by him. In the same way I speak about James Bond did that with Ian Fleming. That so many of the other James Bond things that came after Ian Fleming passed, yes, they might have been unused Fleming ideas, but they were unused Fleming ideas. And a lot of stuff does this, so I don't mind certain things dilly-dallying or whatever. But the strange stuff I just wasn't really bothered by. We had Kieran Hines turn up as an evil wizard who they don't think is Sauron, which is going to clearly be a plot moving forward. My only concern is if you're lining up the canon of Gandalf being involved with the One Ring, with the hobbits down the line, if in 5 seasons he doesn't end up converging into the main storyline, then his entire storyline feels pointless, because I would like this show to, like Game of Thrones did eventually, combine everything together. We've seen that happen in season 2 a couple of times already, with a few of the characters coming and going. And we know eventually where it's going to go, but I am a bit wary of the storyline with Gandalf. Again, I liked it. I've really liked Daniel Wayman's performance in this, but I'm just not all that invested in that story. I'm sorry. I don't need Gandalf's origin. And I know the showrunners have said, like, oh, everyone would be expecting Gandalf. We couldn't make the series without him. And I was like, I get it from the general audience perspective. If they find a way to make it work across 5 seasons, great. Because again, with 2 seasons in, he's getting his own origin. But I'm just somewhat on the whole thing.
Could we just turn around and say, like, this is actually the end of his origin? Because realistically, the series 1 was he was the stranger, he rode in on a star. It was one of those mysteries of, oh, is he going to be a good wizard? Is he going to be a bad wizard? Was he going to be Sauron? It was one of those things in that first season, and it got kind of solved at the end. He's a good wizard. He's going to go with the 2 hobbits, and he's going to kind of go, or at least with 1 hobbit, and then this season 2 hobbits kind of go around and stuff like that. But you know, with the introduction of Tom Bombadil and introduction of the Dark Wizard, which I want to say very quickly, Kieran Hines, great in every role that he's in. Rory Kinnear, wasn't expecting to see his face because I hadn't watched the trailers for this. That was a really fun kind of, oh, it's Rory Kinnear, excellent, with a very, very thick West Country accent, which I really loved. I mean, he gets named at the end of this storyline. He is the Grand Elf. He is the Gandalf. But like, because he's now been named, because he's now got his staff, and because of those things there, could they just end his storyline there? Is that just the end of it? Is it just a little tale that's tacked on? Or are they going to involve him a bit more in the seasons? Are they going to have him go to the realms of men? Are they going to have him talk with the dwarves and build up those relationships so that by the time it gets round to, you know, The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings or whatever they have kind of, going forwards, whether they link it back into the films or whatever, he has those relationships built up already and he has that trust of Middle Earth. Or are they just going to leave it there and just go, do you know what? He's had his story. The mystery's been solved. This is how Gandalf came into existence. This is how he came to Middle Earth. He hung around with Tom Bombadil for a while. He became a nice person, and then he kind of went back to the Shire. It's an interesting point to think about.
Yeah, and kind of where I jump in with it is I feel like what we're going to get with the seasons moving forward is the Harfoots are a type of hobbits, and they're like the ancestors. And obviously we know with how this season ended is that with the new, I want to call it the new village or something, they're obviously on the move to relocate. So I feel like it's going to be this weird side piece for the seasons where we'll eventually have them reach what will go on to be the hobbits in the Shire with Hobbiton. And I think that's where his story is going, because you look at Lord of the Rings and he's friends with them and this and that. And he's always looked out for them. And I don't even mind the Gandalf stuff. But yeah, it does feel like, the Dark Wizard. It feels like it's been thrown in there. Like, we need to give him some peril down the line. We need to give him some peril in a future season. And this is what we can do to do that. And, if the evil Dark Wizard, obviously Saruman isn't a villain at this point within the history. So if Saruman was to turn up, I know that the wizards come down in different time points. The descriptions I have is basically in my head of just that scene in Transformers where they all start turning up. And you're going to get, the Spunk Wizard Radagast the Brown at some point as well. You're going to get all of this happen over probably the next 3 years. And again, I know people are like, this didn't happen for another 100 years. No one seemed to bother about the Lord of the Rings films condensing what was like a 200-year story into a smaller, confined story. And it's always interesting seeing those tangents. And there's the one thing I say, and we said this with the House of Dragon, and I've said it so many times with comic book stuff. The key word is adaptation. It is not directly saying we are pinpointing every second, every sentence into this in order, as any writer has to do. It's an adaptation to the big screen. In this case, it's a 5-season show, which I think is going to benefit the Silmarillion or the Second Age, whatever they're going to look into, far more than any series of films could. I think Lord of the Rings is nailed in what it needs to be. We saw it fail with The Hobbit, that they made that into a trilogy when it didn't need to be a trilogy. And I will go so far to say, and I will be talking a lot about dwarves later on, but I do think this series is already more superior than the 3 Hobbit films. And I think this is going to continue to grow. I think the audiences are going to continue to grow with it. I know there's a drop-off across season 1, but the viewing numbers for season 2 have been very solid from the Nielsen charts, and Amazon releasing a statement saying that their international viewers are almost 3 times the size of the domestic one. So it's obviously been successful in that regard. And I will also add, there's only one person on this planet that wanted this show made to begin with, and that was Jeff Bezos. He led the talks with the Tolkien estate and Amazon to do this. And listen, I don't like Jeff Bezos, the guy, but I'm sat there thinking, if Jeff Bezos wanted 5 seasons of Lord of the Rings being adapted to the big screen, he's going to get his 5 seasons of Lord of the Rings, irrespective of the quality. Whether they chop and churn, I agree that the showrunners are inexperienced. I've always understood that. And I think they're growing with it. And I think season 2 is a remarkable improvement upon that. And that's why I'm a bit more patient with the storylines such as this. But sorry to jump in and repeat, but sometimes I just didn't particularly care for this one. And I hope in future seasons it's one I care about a little bit more.
Which is actually quite funny, because the next storyline we're going to talk about, I didn't care for at all. So for me, like, it's a switch around. I can safely say that these 2 are the weakest storylines. But I just did not care for Numenor this season. I don't know what it was about Numenor, but I feel like not much actually happened this season. I think it was riding off what had happened in the previous season, and from where we start the season to where we end the season, there isn't a whole bunch that actually happens. What happens? There's a trial, the trial happens, then we're like kind of left in a bit of a kind of what's going to happen in the next season kind of thing. And I know that there are future plans for Numenor, but apart from the pretty visuals, I really did not care for any of the characters in the Realms of Men this season, which is a shame, because in a show like this, you want to get invested in the characters, you want to get invested into the places, And this show does it so well with, the dwarves, the elves, with Adar and the orcs, and with Sauron and Celebrimbor. So the fact that this one storyline I just could not connect with is a bit of a shame.
That's very fair. I'm with you for a lot of it. There's one person that's carried this storyline for me, and it's Elendil, which is played by Lloyd Owen, who we know is obviously his son is a Isildur. We know where that story is going to go when they eventually get back together. But if you know the fate of Numenor, then not like, oh, it's obvious what happens, but it's almost like a Last of Us 2 type thing where it's like, yeah, something wild's going to happen at some point in this show. And when it does, that's going to move the story forwards dramatically. And I'm almost waiting for that to happen. And I am bored by some of it, especially the false king. Let's go for the religions. Let's take out the religious places. And it's very, I hate using the Game of Thrones comparison, but Camille is like a Joffrey descendant of he's as evil as him, but it's like this is someone that's going to have one of the most like horrific deaths that everyone is excited for. He's going to get what's coming to him, and until that point, he's going to continue to terrorize us. I'm not sold on the daughter's slow realization that she was wrong all this time, but Elendil, I absolutely love in this. I think Ian Lloyd's been one of the MVPs of the show. And I'm really excited for future seasons when we're going to obviously see him go from captain to leader and a few other things. Sorry, I must say, it sounded like that awful John Terry thing, didn't it? Captain, leader, legend, pathetic. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's not all there. It feels somewhat predictable, but again, depending on season 3, when Numenor storyline's done and dusted, I think it could be one of the best ones. But it feels a bit painted by the numbers at the moment. That yes, of course, the not descendant of Aragorn, like Aragorn's, heir onwards. I forgot the lineage term, but it's one of them where we know where it's going to go ultimately with Isildur. And even the time we spent with Isildur in this series, I didn't care for as well. But again, when it wasn't the main focus of the season, feels like a side quest plodding onwards, because I'd say there were like 3 other main storylines that really were the bulk of season 2. But I feel that these guys that sat in the background on season 2 are the ones that aren't going to be around. But I will say one of the best scenes of the series was the Lloyd Owen trial. Not the trial, the court sequence when he, again, felt very Game of Thrones, the Tyrion Lannister stuff, and I love those courtroom sequences. I love it when you get an actor that's just given the chance to monologue in a courtroom, not you, Joker, Follier, that was poor. But yes, sorry to plug that other thing.
No, 100%. And that is one of the strongest scenes, I'd say, of the season. It's just such a shame that it came in such a boring plot line, for me at least. But I'd happily talk about some more exciting plot lines like the dwarves, which so much happens with the dwarves this season. I mean, first of all, like the visuals in the mines are great, and I love the setting of it. It being dimly lit, but also having all of the markets and all the different the different things in there. But at the end of the last season, we had the teaser, right, for the Balrog, like in the basement, and it's the one thing that I'd carried over from the previous season, because it's the one shot that was like, oh dear God, that's going to happen at some point. And throughout the entire season, I was like, when's it going to break? Like, when's it all going to come crashing down? And even though like the dwarf plotline for the entire season is quite really long, and there's so many different things going in there, the power struggles between King Doran and his son and everything like that, it's great. But at the same time, like, I was just waiting for the scene where the Balrog would come, because it's something that I can attach myself to from Lord of the Rings. And dear Lord, I mean, the final episode delivered so hard on that. It's done in like a what's the word for it? It's like a prologue, isn't it?
It's like a pre-title sequence.
It's a pre-title sequence. It's about 20 minutes long, and it is fantastic that it wraps that entire storyline in there. I mean, it's just a phenomenal scene, and just visually stunning, and wraps it all around. But like I said, so much happens before then in the season. They give the dwarves so many different things to do, whether you're looking at the power struggle with dealing with the rings themselves and how they corrupt, or, you know, just dealing with the kind of day-to-day struggles in the mines, or dealing with kind of, you know, them trying to help out the elves and then just not being able to in the end, and that entire collapse in episode 7, which I thought was fantastic. I really enjoyed the plotline here with the dwarves.
Yeah, and it's kind of what I said earlier when I was like, by getting less time with maybe Númenor or with the Gandalf stuff, you got more time with the sort of meatier stories. And one of the things I love most about Lord of the Rings is the power of the ring on Frodo and how it darkens him. And where I loved with this, and we kind of said it before, when I was like, oh, like after the end of season 1, they made the elf ring. So I was like, please don't just make a new set of rings every season finale. And we'll get to the ring makers later. But the dwarf storyline of the prince falling out with his father, then him bringing the ring as a solution to their dwarven problems, only to realize this is not the solution.
It makes it worse.
Yeah, to see the king descend to give into the ring, into the greed, and actually knowing that the ring hasn't worked the way that Sauron planned it to work. That something didn't work with it on the dwarves, and something's not quite right, and that instead of them being possessed by him or being able to be controlled by that, it's it almost enhances their greed, which is obviously when you jump to the Hobbit, we know that was the downside of what happened to them over there. And even with Khazad-dûm, when we see it in the Fellowship of the Ring, it's another one. The Balrogs there, it's what you said, right? And it's the imagery that is a selling point, that even if it's not accurate, you're going to put the Balrog in it, people are going to go. And again, it's not me making excuses, it's that adaptation thing. There's got to be a visible threat. And you want to not just bring something in for the sake of it, but the concept of the Balrog in Khazad-dûm makes sense. We know it happens eventually. Seeing tidbits of it, I'm glad it wasn't the Balrog rocked up, there's the season cliffhanger, or it killed the king and that hole's open. The fact that actually it sort of resealed itself back to the bottom knows, will this ever turn up again? I don't know in this series, but we know it's there should they need it. And even Sauron playing in the fire with it a couple of episodes before, when they're not going to give in to give him the mithril, and he is raging, and he sort of, somewhat plans it. I've really enjoyed what they did with this, and I think the performances from the trio that led the storyline were some of the best. Again, the performances in season 2 were great. Again, I thought season 1 had a lot of good performances, but like what any multi-season show should do, performances improve and they're enhanced by having more material, by being able to develop the characters more and the actors to grow with these characters. And I absolutely love the dwarf stuff. I'm going to miss King Durin. I think he's been one of the best characters of the show. And kind of something without just sort of dissing the Hobbit. The one thing I loved about the Rings of Power is the dwarves have looked like dwarves. I have this real thing of the Hobbit where you go to the poster, it's got all the Hobbit faces on, and it's like, oh look, there's like a someone covered in prosthetics, great. And the next one's like, that Poldark, it looks like Poldark with a wig. And then you get to Richard Armitage, and it's just Richard Armitage with an axe. And then the next one below again is someone in incredible prosthetics. And I really like this series has. Again, it's got a 700 million budget. See it on screen. We get to see it on screen of these. I love what they've done. I don't follow the Emmys too much. I know Shogun sweep this year, but I know 2 years ago we had House of the Dragon airing at the same time of Rings of Power, and House of the Dragon Country Mile swatted it in terms of season 1. I think season 2 of Rings of Power has been better than season 2 of House of the Dragon.
It's definitely closing up. Yeah, it's definitely closing up. I mean, I'd say a lot more happens in Rings of Power than what happened in House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon was more of a slow burn kind of, we'll get to it eventually, whereas this one's, we're getting to it right now, and it's going to continue kind of storyline. So, especially with the dwarf storyline, they really accelerated it in this series by giving, them the rings that early on. Was it episode 3 or?
Sorry, I just binged it all. I don't know.
I mean, the episodes blur together, but they get the rings reasonably early on in the series, and you see how fast it corrupts. So, it's I think Emmy-wise, it's got a shout of competing at least, especially up against the other powerhouse in the fantasy genre in TV at the moment. I agree.
Are we missing anything on the dwarves? I mean, I'm not going to sit here saying, what do we think is going to happen? They made a comment about Durin having a brother that's going to contest his inheritance. But I will say, when it got to the merging with the storylines we'll get to later, the moment where the dwarves don't turn up at sunlight, and you know that Durin has basically been like, if you take the army out, we're all going to die. I loved all of that, and I love the conflict it had, the knock-on effect it had, because we know, again, by the time you get to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, dwarves and elves, they do not like each other. And at this point in time, they sort of do. So whether something else is going to happen as time goes by, or it's going to be something due to this season, I thought, oh, this could have terrible ramifications. This is why they hate them in the future, but it's understandable. And I think by keeping Elrond and the Prince so far apart until he needs him in the 7th episode, I loved it. It was
there's going to be a big betrayal coming, and this is just sowing the seeds of it, because, and I guess we're going on to the elf storyline now. That scene might be one of my favorites of the season. Just the scene of he will come, just him, just kind of complete denial. Elrond just on the battlefield. He's just, his men around him have died, and he's been completely abandoned, and he's lost. And he's like, no, he will come. He is my friend. He will come, and he doesn't show. And I think the acting in that scene was just fantastic. And we all know what the situation is from the other side. He had no choice. But I think the merging of the storylines there was really, really well done. And it built to it. You kind of expected, are they going to show up? Is there going to be something that's going to stop them? And yeah, something does stop them. And, throughout this series, we kind of have two storylines of the elves. We have what Elrond's doing and, what Galadriel's doing. And for a lot of the episodes, they do marry up and they do kind of work together throughout. But, Elrond's real kind of main command is make sure that no one gets corrupted by the rings. He sees that they're dangerous from the off, and he doesn't want anything to do with them. And Galadriel absolutely gets seduced from the second, she picks one up. It's an interesting dynamic that comes with the season, even to the point where when Galadriel gets captured midway through the season by Adar, he's saying, oh, there's the others are saying, oh, she sacrificed herself. He's like, no, she saved the ring. Like, it's not a sacrifice for herself. She is absolutely making sure that the ring doesn't get into the wrong hands, because she needs to protect the ring more than she needs to protect her life. So it's fascinating how in this series, the rings have suddenly become like such a crazy power play across every single kind of, area that we visit. And yeah, it's fantastic how it's played out.
Even go back to the first episode when Elrond's on the mission to make sure no one can get them, and he's going to run away. And I really like him in this series. And again, limited information going off what happens down the line of Lord of the Rings. Isildur, cast it into the fire, destroy it. If that's going to happen in season 5, then you really need to have Elrond from day one oppose this and have the knowledge to avoid the pull and the lure of it, which is what I think this is handled really well. And in turn with that, Galadriel's temptations into the ring, I love, because you go again to the Lord of the Rings, and she can't be on that quest. She can't be involved. She cannot trust herself. And I really like that dynamic with them. There is that mutual respect and friendship between them. Got to talk about the kiss. This was one of the few things I'd seen spoiled per se. As it would be, it was a clipped 10-second Twitter clip from a certain account, absolutely raging with no context. And everyone's saying, that's his mother-in-law down the line. Well, you know what? A, that's down the line. But B, it was a distraction to pass the thing. And again, this is where I just not want to moan about social media and what people do online. But if someone's not watching the show, they see a 10-second clip out of context, they think, bloody hell, they've destroyed it. It's like when a football club signs a terrible striker, but you get the 10-second YouTube compilation of them looking good. This is like the reverse of that. It was just a simple ploy to get her, again, the way to be able to break out from Adar's trap. And I don't care for it. I don't care for people being insane that he'll kiss his mother-in-law. I mean, these guys are immortal, right? How many hundreds and hundreds of years is that going to take? And again, it's just some of the utter nonsense that you see, it's awful takes that you see. But again, it was never a romantic kiss. It's not a Kylo Ren Rey thing where people were shipping it online for a couple of years and they eventually did it. it was clearly a moment, because he asks her for his apologies before he even kisses her as well, which is a clear fucking sign that it's not anything meaningful in the romantic sense.
It's people not understanding how relationships work. You know, this is absolutely clearly a distraction play and a play on we're going to get you out of here kind of thing. There's nothing romantic there. They have good on-screen chemistry, but that doesn't mean that they're romantically involved in the series. And yeah, that's just ridiculous. I didn't realize. I mean, as soon as I watched, I was like, I'm not even going to look online and see what other people think of this. I'm just going to form my own opinions here because I knew that it would probably be blown out of proportion. But no, it's used as a distraction. It works. You know, she gets free. She meets up with Arondir, and you know, he kind of gets involved. He kind of floats through this season. It's quite interesting what his character does as one of the other elves who are kind of involved in all of this. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed what they did with the elves this season, all of them.
I mean, we haven't really spoke about Arondir. I have some thoughts on this, and maybe this is a bit early because we're going to get to some of the bits later, but I thought he was dead in episode 7.
I knew you were going to say this. Like, I thought he was dead as well.
Yeah, I was watching on the train on last Wednesday's show because I had it ready to. I got to episode 7 in the day. That's wild, actually. And Adar like guts him, like it's brutal. And I was like, oh wow, like they've gone for one of like the main characters that we've done marketing and been discussed online. And I don't know if my eyes deceive me, but we don't see him again in that episode. We'd see him literally die on the battlefield. And then he just was in episode 8 fine and normal.
Yeah.
And I was like, have I missed something? Am I not clued up on something? Is it like Narnia where there's, you know, the magic liquid that can recover you to 1,000,000% if you give him a drop or something? I just was so confused by the outcome. I didn't mind the fact he's alive, but it felt like there was some we were losing a key character to really enhance this terrible loss in episode 7. But it wasn't that sort of. So he didn't have a lot to do. He sort of waltzes between. I mean, he's with a Isildur at one moment, and he's, as he said, I'm just walking on my path for like his episode. And I know that the actress he was paired with in season 1, she's quit acting altogether. I was reading, so I understand that's why they have her like killed off screen before the episode begins at the funeral with that Theo lad, because she's just chosen to quit acting as a whole. I think to actually just take a normal job or working in like a green type thing, which again is like, what do you do in that scenario? I'm glad they didn't recast her because that wasn't a storyline I cared for. Their storyline was for the purpose of Mordor becoming Mordor as the time went by. So I didn't particularly care for that bit. But yeah, with that, you sort of then lose a storyline with Arondir. You've got Theo the lad who's sort of bumbling by. And I think it actually benefits the series that we lose a storyline we didn't particularly need. But they needed to obviously plan to get him to Galadriel and the others to, I guess, for seasons moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I completely agree with you, by the way. I swear he was dead. Like,
they really fixed in on it too.
But what's really bad is it would have been really good if he died. Not because I dislike the character, but the scene warranted one of the major characters to fall there. And we know that Elrond, like, he's in the Lord of the Rings. We know he's there when it gets to it. So one of the other characters had to die, especially when the elves had been abandoned by the dwarves. Someone needed to die at that point in time. And I thought that was the one. And I mean, I actually thought, wow, this is the best episode they put out so far. This is fantastic. Like, you've got sacrifice, you've got a great battle scene. You know, it's all played out. His entire mission was that he wanted to get revenge on Adar, and he's gone up to go and fight him, and he's been gutted. He's been completely destroyed by him. So I thought that would be a great end to a storyline. It would have been good character development for Adar, and it would have been just excellent across the board. But no, we see him in the next episode, and then like literally a scene or one scene after, one scene later, Adar gets killed. So it's like, you know, it's I was a little bit frustrated by that. That's one of the things that really irked me this season.
Do you want to talk about Adar? Should we head into that?
I want to. They changed actors, but yeah, it didn't make a big difference.
Benjamin Stark quit, didn't he, to quit pursue the measures? And I will say this: I didn't realize it'd been recast till like 3 episodes in. I think Michael Rawley took over, who I thought did a really good job of the season. And Adar was just a very strange character in season 1. Again, it's season 1; you're setting up so many different things. But season 2, again, benefits of having second seasons that you get to develop these characters from before. Who'd have ever thought it? You develop characters in TV shows as they go on. And the Adar stuff was great. I actually ended up being gutted for him, pun not intended, by the end. They had this really good relationship with Galadriel, and actually the chemistry of him and Morfydd Clark I really enjoyed, especially where ultimately his goal wasn't to gain power. His goal was to just kill Sauron to free the orcs. And I know this has caused a bit of a stir where people don't like that the orcs have families now. Because the orcs are the slaves of Morgoth and Sauron. Well, we get to see how and why they're the slaves in this. That Adar is trying to get them out of that. And he is foolishly betrayed. And I do think one criticism of the show is there are certain moments where we could have done with an extra scene or two. Certainly with the Adar stuff, it's a bit obvious what's going to happen to him at the end. The old George Lucas it's like poetry at rhymes with repeating certain things. But the orcs are slaves of Sauron, or always have been, and you know that he is going to get them back this season. He needs to have his army as he's sort of regrowing as Halbrand. And it was obvious that Adar was not going to make it out. He's, of course, a new character created for the show. And I think they did really well by creating a new character who actually got a lot of depth, some great performances, and has actually quite a nice little 2-season arc to go with it. And ultimately, his blindness and sort of following in Sauron's footsteps of not necessarily turning on the orcs, but becoming the sort of thing he swore to destroy, where he is using them as cattle. He doesn't care what happens. He's going to send the troll in, knowing the troll's going to kill loads of them, by the way. But he's going to do it because he's so desperate to kill Sauron, and you can understand his reasoning as to why, but also he's clearly afraid of Sauron. And it doesn't work out for him. And I just thought the Adar stuff, it was interesting seeing somewhat humanity attempt to be put onto the orcs before they are fully, again, put into Sauron's power, locked in Mordor to be the orcs that we know. And I get why not everyone likes that. I'm not saying we need an origin for the orcs because we don't, but I liked seeing that relationship explored, which this series handled a lot better than season 1 did, I'd say.
Yes, I'd say so as well. And also, Adar as a character played this season by Sam Hazeldine. Hazeldine?
Sam Hazeldine. I got my quote mixed up, my bad.
That's okay. One of my favorite scenes of the season was him putting on the Elven Ring and seeing him as what he used to be and giving him that humanity. You love a villain who really toes the line. And could you really say that Adar was a villain in this series? Realistically, as a watcher, we want Sauron to die. He's the main villain. Adar's just another person who wants that, who's maybe on the wrong side of the fence with it. I think it's expertly played, and I think it's really, really well written for a character that doesn't come from, the Silmarillion or the original media, just to be brought into the show and to be kind of, this is what we can do as character writers to introduce something new into the show, something that people won't expect. And I really enjoyed the performance from both of them, actually, from Joseph Maul and from Sam Hazeldine across the 2 series. It's a shame that we won't get to revisit the character anymore. Unless, because he's an elf, is he immortal? Did he survive those stab wounds? I mean, we've literally just spoken about, another character living those wounds themselves. So it's like, we'll see how it goes.
I mean, should we talk Sauron? We haven't really spoken about
it. Yeah, let's talk about
let's talk the opening scene of the entire show. Jack Lowden playing Sauron. Now, my understanding of Sauron, I'm sure someone can correct me, that he is essentially a shapeshifter, but his finest form is what Jack Lowden is. So that's set in, I believe, the First Age. And again, Adar being a new character, after Morgoth is killed, Sauron basically becomes Dr. Evil. Let's just call him that. And bringing in the choice to have Sauron lose his army, to have him have not necessarily be a victim in that moment, but have a pretty brutal death, being gutted by all of them, refusing to be crowned, basically being a bit of venom, a bit of black goo between the cracks, and he has to. I don't know if he's eating people or just like devouring their life form to essentially grow, but we see the origin of him as Hellbrand, and you go back to season 1 and it's, oh yeah, is he going to be Sauron? He probably is going to be Sauron. I like the fact they didn't just take that and move on. They went to his backstory now of what happened leading up to those moments of him meeting Galadriel in the first season, because that is very important for this. And the Jack Lowden thing, I don't know if it was official before the series started. I do wonder if by the time Sauron creates the One Ring, if he is back to his full strength per se, in his quote finest form, does that mean we're going to lose Charlie Vickers, who has been incredible in the series, to being Jack Lowden again? I think we could. And I'll be a bit gutted because Charlie Vickers has been incredible in this show. And knowing it's the same actor from the first season, but not only, he's got long hair, he's had a shave, he's got a wig, it feels like two completely different performances, and that benefits Sauron. And one of my biggest criticisms of Lord of the Rings itself is Sauron's an eye. There's no threat. Everyone tells you how evil this person is, but seeing is believing, my friends, and we're finally getting to actually see it. And I think that's where I always struggle with Lord of the Rings. Yes, it's a simple equation of good versus evil, but I never ever felt like Sauron was a real threat. And I believe that in the books and whatnot, because he's a shapeshifter, he was never fully healed until the One Ring is made and he bears his connection and bonds to it. I understood why he can't be seen, but I'm really appreciating that we're getting to see him now. We're getting to see this shapeshifter who, let's be honest, you've got to be really stupid to just craft 17 rings total they make.
Yeah.
Or however many it is. You have to be really thick to just continuously make rings for this bad guy and not realize something else going on. So what this show, I think, has done to its massive credit is devote the entire second season to the crafting of these rings and doing it in a way in which, A, there's no Celebrimbor in season 3, but B, everybody knows that Sauron's on the battlefield, that they know that he is on the chessboard of the series, that he isn't hiding in the shadows. And I think this series absolutely nailed that. But by essentially reining him into being in a subplot with just Celebrimbor, I thought was one of the best ideas they had. Their chemistry with one another, the sequences, the writing, the manipulation into madness, taking, look at the meme from season 1, I think it was the Insane Weekly, where Celebrimbor does the hand-waving thing in the magazine. It's really funny. The performances that season goes on is incredible, and I know that some people are not about the fridging of, I had no chance of remembering her name, but look, there's one person in Celebrimbor's crafting team who actually has lines of dialogue. She's going to get a brutal end. Probably one of the most horrific fucking deaths of the whole series. Being tossed off the side of a building, then turning over a splattered face to then get absolutely massacred by orcs. Doesn't deserve that.
No.
Some people have complained, but I will add this. We haven't spoken about it. This series is rated 15 in the UK because it had popped up on the streaming before, and they really handled the violence after moaning about how someone was killed, but the orcs felt like these murdering, ravaging creatures, and the troll just chewing their heads and throwing people. For the first time on Rings, I felt like the troll was actually a threat, because we know the Fellowship was going to kill the troll in the other one, but to see it actually be this weapon on the battlefield, I don't think they've done before. And I know I've sort of disappeared from the Sauron stuff, but I loved every scene these two had. And by the end of it, I was gutted. But you know what sold it is Sauron's, not his reluctance to kill him, but the tears in his eyes as he does the final.
I have many names.
Yeah, it's such a good sequence.
It's brilliant. It's so well acted. I mean, Charlie Vickers, I hadn't seen him in anything before. I don't think he'd actually been a major actor in too many things at all, had he?
I've not seen anything. I think he's quite young. I think he's in his 30s.
Yeah, but he hadn't done anything that was massively well known. he's come into this series, and dear God, I mean, first season with Halbrand, like, he was a great actor and he was able to play that deception. This series, it's out in the open now, and he's able to play this just twisting, manipulating, but friendly character throughout the entire season, where you know his intentions are lying, only for kind of the, to bare his teeth at the very, very end. It's phenomenal. And his interactions with Charles Edwards playing Calibrimba was just brilliant. It's the best interactions of the entire season. It's just fantastic. That felt like peak Game of Thrones kind of interactions, which is the first time I can say that for this entire series, that it's got anywhere close to the heights that Game of Thrones ever got to. If they're able to continue that momentum, obviously they won't be able to continue it with, Charles Edwards, because his character's been killed off. But if Charlie Vickers is able to have that interaction with other characters throughout the series, like the connection he's had with Morfydd Clark playing Galadriel, like he's had, with all the characters he's interacted with so far, I can really see this series competing heavily with, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, those kind of upper echelons.
Nail the ending.
Ending, and you've got
it. Here's the thing, right? And this is a summary of TV. Game of Thrones is the obvious answer to what's the series that started off great, ended up being terrible. It's a boring overused question, and people then look at things like Lost. I know Lost had an anniversary recently. I know it's got its fans, but a lot of people didn't like the ending to Lost, and it was, I believe, the biggest show on TV at the time it came out too. And it's one of them where they didn't nail the ending like Game of Thrones. But something like Rings of Power, and there are many great shows. I'm actually going to jump into sitcoms, which is way off point. I'm thinking the US remake of The Office, and I'm thinking Parks and Rec, the two that jump to my head. Some of the worst opening seasons I've ever seen. That would go on to be some of the most iconic comedies in modern history. And I think if the TV show is given time to develop, the characters are given time to be developed, the writers that are working, the showrunners behind the scenes. I mean, I haven't mentioned the visual effects. It's absolutely flawless by ILM doing this. You look at how Marvel have failed and DC have failed, always changing briefs. There is a clear, concise, creative vision within this show. Maybe not on page with the scripts, but from a visual standpoint, I cannot fault anything in this. And I think this is where this show could go. That if it keeps growing, by the time it gets to a potential season 4 or a 5, the conversations people will have will be, yeah, it started off slow, but definitely stick with it. And I'm seeing that happening a lot more now, and we're on 2 seasons. And I do think this will continue to grow. And I understand that the viewership dropped on the first season, again, as more episodes went on. And I will add, I sort of brought this up earlier when you mentioned season 2 was done in a flash. Dropping 3 episodes on the opening week and then doing 5 weekly ones, it's really frustrating because you're not giving the series time weekly between itself to gain that momentum. I know that Amazon's done this with The Boys. They've done it with other shows where they drop 3 and then do it weekly. It's like you're not confident enough of just doing it weekly. You want to release it as a binge, but you also know that's not going to benefit the series either. It's a really frustrating thing Amazon do. But I guess the thing with Amazon is they don't need the viewership.
You say that, but the reason why they've done it is to get people to have that wave of signups and then have to sign on to another month afterwards, which for a company that makes enough money as it is anyway, you don't need to manipulate the fans of the show to be able to do that. For people who don't know already, like, most people are already signed up to Amazon as like a
I believe it's the second biggest. I believe that it's by default the second biggest streaming service because it's included to Amazon Prime. Everyone has it. And, not to get into a football conversation, but Champions League's on Amazon Prime. I'm like, great. Yeah. Don't need the Fire Stick anymore on certain midweek games. And it's one of them where I just think, and again, I don't want to praise Jeff Bezos, but Amazon can sit there and say, yeah, we got the Rings of Power on our streaming service. And that's it. It's a dick measuring contest for them. Because Disney and Max and all these have to go on about what we have and what we're always going to have. Amazon's like, yeah, but we don't need to brag we've got it because we know you've got a streaming service anyway. Use it for shopping. Do they really have that many people signed just to watch a show for a month? Probably not. But they've got very popular shows. And they seem to let them grow. I don't watch it. What's there's another fancy one compared to Game of Thrones, not in terms of
Wheel of
quality.
Time.
Wheel of Time. That's still going. No one watches it. I don't know anyone that's ever watched it. Sure, there must be people watching it somewhere, but hey,
I think it
on Amazon.
got good reviews. I can't remember if it got really good reviews or if the fans hated it.
But it's continued to go because Amazon have got that money up front for people to spend. Do you know what I mean? And it's a really difficult conversation. I know I've sort of gone on from Sauron, but you do feel that had Amazon not bought these rights to I believe they're right to curtained under The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and The Silmarillion, that as in Warner Brothers can't make shows of all these other things. Amazon bought that, and I'll say this. If Warner Brothers were doing a Lord of the Rings TV series, it wouldn't be The Rings of Power. It would be something probably far worse. And for the people that think the show is terrible, trust me, Warner Brothers under David Zaslav has been the destruction of one of, if not the biggest studio in history. And we've seen it self-capitulate. Shows that are working, like Penguin, are working because they've had one creative in Matt Reeves who's been able to keep it going, who's been able to make it happen. If it wasn't for your Matt Reeves, your James Gunns, or even your Last of Us, they've been a very tricky situation. And I feel that it's good that I'm glad this is on a different, and the same for Disney. I'm glad this isn't on Disney too. Because again, we'd have this amazing war on episode 7. It'd be shot on the volume, and I love the volume, and there's a place for it. But the fact this has the budget to say, yeah, we're doing it in Fields and England still, but we're going to make sure it looks cinematic and it looks like it should look.
It looked fantastic.
I can't fault any of the visuals. Yeah,
it looked fantastic. Like it really felt. You kind of watch the battle scene, and you're like, "This is Lord of the Rings. This is like proper like Lord of the Rings battlefield." I didn't get any vibes of like, oh, it's like the gritty realism that comes with Game of Thrones
and
that they go with.
Yeah, it felt cinematic.
It felt really cinematic and like, oh, I'm watching not a TV show Battlefield that's, made to look cinematic. I'm watching a cinematic Battlefield. I really enjoyed it. And I think for this series, the last 2 episodes were clearly the strongest 2 episodes we've had so far from the Rings of Power, including this series 1, which I think had some really strong moments, had some really strong episodes. Yeah. The final 2 episodes of this series absolutely nailed it. And if they can carry that momentum forwards, then great. I'm going to really look forward to Series 3.
No, I'm in the exact same boat with you, and we've lost a king in Celebrimbor and Durin. But the fact that we might get some new character names pop up, who knows? I'm not familiar with who's to come, who's not to come, but we obviously know where Season 3 is heading, that Sauron has the 9 rings for men, and we know that those 9 rings are going to have to find their way to 9 people to become eventually the Nazgul. I am excited to see if we've met maybe some of those, or if we're going to get some new characters that do it. And I think Season 2's left us in a really good place for Season 3, that we're going to see some resistance forming, but we're going to see Sauron continue to grow. Now he's got his army of orcs. He's going to keep growing that army. And I do think where Season 5 is heading towards, I'm just going to call it the prologue towards the rings. The last battle, or whatever it would be, Isildur taken upon the sword. We're going to get some really good stuff, and I think Season 3 is going to be not a transitional season, but I feel like Season 3 could be one where by the end of it, we've condensed another 2 storylines into the main big one. And it's kind of reflective of how I thought the season, is it perfect? No. Is it bad? Absolutely not. It's been a really enjoyable series. And for anyone, I mean, if you're watching this an hour in, we don't need to recommend it to you, some of the spoilers, but I think this is very popular with the general audience. Yes, some Tolkien people might like it. Certainly people online might like it. Algorithms are playing their games as always, but there's clearly an audience for this. The numbers don't lie. And those numbers, as has happened across Season 2, have grown and grown. Although I will add, streaming numbers are always really frustrating because they just classify the minutes of the show. So it doesn't mean episode 8's got 8 million people. It means, I don't know, 68 million minutes were watched. It could be across Season 1, but I do think, like myself, like you, people were coming on board later into the series. They were waiting for episodes. I thought they did a pretty piss poor job at marketing this before Season 2 came out.
Oh, massively.
And I don't think they'll have a problem with Season 3. I think the audience will be locked in now. But that's kind of, that's so good. That's I feel like that was like my finale without it meaning to be one. But I don't really have a lot more to add to this Rings of Power discussion. Do you?
Not really. I mean, it's a good show. We've just spoiled it for you, but if you haven't watched it, go watch it. But I'm looking forward to series 3. Is I think a good point to end it on.
Yeah, and as always, when there is season 3 announcements, when there is stuff, we'll probably bring them up in our monthly stream for next month. I know yesterday you and Aaron went live to talk about what we were watching in September. The monthly stream will pop up every month with these. There's a lot of other videos happening on the channel, and the Rings of Power will return, and it will likely be with us. Seasonal discussions like what we've had today. I ain't got time to talk about 3 hours a week, 8 weeks. No, thank you. I don't have that sort of time. But rounding out, as always, I do want to hear from people. So please do comment your thoughts on the Rings of Power, whether you liked it, disliked it. We do want to hear your comments. We're not opposed to people with differing views. We've both liked it. I'm sure we could have got a third person on who didn't. But there's a lot of videos happening, so we just planned for us to on this one today. So let us know your thoughts. If you want to find out about what other videos we're working on, we've got a new Mount Rushmore dropping tomorrow. We're doing the Mount Rushmore of James Bond films. That was pre-recorded with it being James Bond Day on Saturday. And we've got another announcement in that for next week's one. So that's happening every Tuesday. Transformers 1 comes out in the UK this week. It's London Film Festival. There's reviews coming out. When we have them, we put them on our social media to tell you what is coming up. We've had a Joker spoiler-free one. We've got the monthly stream, as I said. So that is going to do it for today. Thank you all for watching, for everyone being so patient, watching along. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care.